Howdy folks, and welcome to Explaining Gun Control Part 8, Unenforceable Laws. Now the first thing we're going to be talking about here are bump stocks. You may know these from the Vegas shooting and 0 others. Since the Vegas shooting, there's been a lot of discussion about banning bump stocks, and I believe some states have, but these bans don't work and you can't enforce them. The biggest reason is that you don't need a bump stock to bump fire a gun. It takes a little bit of practice, but it is certainly possible, and it wouldn't be any less effective than if you had a bump stock. So why ban bump stocks? The only reason is so that politicians can have a notch on their belt to say, yes, they did something about gun violence, even though it doesn't work. The only thing that banning bump stocks accomplishes is wasting people's tax dollars by trying to push it through. The next one we're going to talk about here is magazine capacity limits. Now, I live in Colorado, where we have unfortunately enacted a law saying that we are not allowed to have any magazines with a capacity over, I think it's 15. But you wouldn't know that. Since they grandfathered in all the magazines that existed at the time, you have no way of knowing which magazines existed before the ban and which ones were manufactured after the ban. And as such, there's no possible way to know which magazines are legal and which ones are not. Therefore, unenforceable. In fact, this law was so toothless that 55 out of the 62 sheriffs in the state refused to enforce it. Now, the most ridiculous reason magazine capacity limits are stupid is that you can just switch magazines. If you're practiced, it takes almost no effort and it takes almost no time. Now, much to the annoyance of gun enthusiasts all over California recognized this and they implemented something called a bullet button, which means you have to have a tool to release the magazine. And just this last year, California legislators decided that even that was too easy, and they banned bullet buttons. The problem is, as long as the platform remains legal, you can always manufacture around it. That, or you can just go get parts from somewhere else and restore normal function. At the end of the day, a magazine is just a box with a spring in it, and anybody that wanted to circumvent restrictions on them wouldn't have a hard time doing it. And the last thing we're going to talk about here are universal background checks. In most states, you can sell a gun to, say, your friend or a relative without going through a background check. These are called private sales, and a lot of people are pushing for background checks on these as well. Back in 2013, when Colorado passed the magazine capacity limit law, they also passed a law requiring background checks on all private sales. And as of 2015, they have convicted 3 people of violating that law. Now, why is this the case? The only way anybody would know if you sold a gun to somebody without doing a background check was if you told them that, or you sold it to an undercover police officer. The only way legislation like this would work is if you had a gun registry that tracked who had what gun and when they sold it to somebody, which is both unpalatable and unacceptable. I'll be going into gun registries in another video. Suffice to say, for the purposes of this point, gun registries are extremely hard to pass. Now, having said all that, I don't think it's particularly wise to sell to shady strangers that you don't know, especially if it turns out that they wind up committing a crime with that weapon. If it turns out they're not supposed to have it, you could be on the hook. So, to summarize here, laws like these are easy to circumvent, they have no effect on gun crime, they only hurt law-abiding citizens, and they waste tax dollars. Anyway, this is it for today, and I will see you next time. Ciao.